A political firestorm has erupted in America, sending shockwaves through every level of government and society. The nation finds itself at a crossroads, with tensions rising and uncertainty looming over what comes next. At the center of this storm stands Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker, locked in a fierce and very public battle with former President Donald Trump. Their clash is not just a personal rivalry, but a symbol of the deep divisions fracturing the country. Chicago, a city long known for its resilience and diversity, has suddenly become the epicenter of a constitutional crisis. The decisions made here now carry consequences that ripple far beyond city limits, affecting the entire nation. This is a battle over the very nature of American federalism, the boundaries of presidential authority, and the fundamental rights of states to govern themselves. The stakes could not be higher, as the outcome may redefine the relationship between Washington and the states for generations. The world is watching closely. International media outlets broadcast every development as Pritzker and Trump engage in a confrontation that tests the nation's legal and political foundations. Allies and adversaries alike are gauging America's stability and resolve. The conflict reached a fever pitch on October 8, 2025. That day, Trump called for the jailing of both Pritzker and Chicago's mayor, Brandon Johnson, after federalized National Guard troops were deployed to the city. The move shocked many and drew condemnation and support in equal measure. At the heart of the dispute are Chicago's sanctuary city policies, which limit cooperation with federal immigration authorities. These policies have long been a flashpoint in the national debate over immigration and local autonomy. For Trump and his supporters, these policies represent a direct challenge to federal law and the authority of the presidency. They argue that cities like Chicago are undermining national security and the rule of law. For Pritzker, Johnson, and many Chicagoans, these policies are a lifeline for vulnerable communities, offering protection to immigrants and refugees who fear deportation. They see their stance as a moral imperative, defending the city's values of inclusion and compassion. The city has become a tense stage for a national drama, with real-world implications for millions of people. Every decision, every statement, is scrutinized by a public hungry for answers and anxious about the future. Armed federal agents now patrol Chicago's streets, creating an atmosphere of fear and uncertainty, especially within immigrant neighborhoods. Families worry about their safety, unsure of what tomorrow might bring. Legal battles are already underway, with teams of lawyers preparing to argue cases that could set new precedents for the balance of power between the federal government and the states. The courts may ultimately decide the fate of Chicago's policies, and perhaps the future of American democracy itself. The events unfolding in Chicago are a microcosm of a larger national conflict, one that has been simmering for years and is now at a boiling point. Across the country, protests erupt, political debates rage, and Americans grapple with what kind of nation they want to be. The outcome of this crisis will shape the future of the United States, determining not only the fate of Chicago, but the direction of the nation for years to come. As the world watches, America stands at a pivotal moment in its history. To understand the crisis, we must look at Chicago's long history as a sanctuary city. This city has a rich tradition of being a haven for those seeking a better life, dating back to the early 20th century when waves of immigrants arrived from Europe, Asia, and Latin America. For decades, Chicago has welcomed immigrants, building trust between communities and local government. This trust is evident in the vibrant neighborhoods that celebrate a mosaic of cultures, languages, and traditions, making Chicago a true melting pot. The Illinois Trust Act, signed in 2017, prohibits local police from detaining individuals solely for immigration reasons without a court warrant. This act was a significant step in ensuring that local law enforcement focuses on community safety rather than immigration enforcement. Chicago's welcoming city ordinance goes even further, offering additional protections. This ordinance ensures that city resources are not used to enforce federal immigration laws, reinforcing the city's commitment to being a sanctuary for all its residents. These laws reflect the values of Chicago's residents and were enacted through public debate. The community's voice has been instrumental in shaping policies that prioritize human dignity and respect for all individuals, regardless of their immigration status. The clash between local laws and federal objectives has simmered for years, but the Trump administration's aggressive approach has turned it into an ideological war. This conflict has brought national attention to the differing philosophies on immigration and governance. Chicago's stance is not a reaction to one administration, but a deeply held belief about how a city should treat its residents. This belief is rooted in the city's history and the experiences of its diverse population, who have long advocated for inclusive and humane policies. City leaders argue they are upholding their own laws, while the federal government is overstepping its bounds. They believe that local governance should reflect the values and needs of the community it serves rather than being dictated by distant federal mandates. This foundational disagreement over jurisdiction and values is the bedrock of the current conflict. It highlights the tension between local autonomy and federal authority, a debate that has significant implications for the future of immigration policy in the United States. It sets the stage for an unprecedented legal and political battle. The outcome of this conflict will not only shape the future of Chicago, but could also influence the national conversation on immigration and the balance of power between local and federal governments. The conflict exploded when the Trump administration deployed 300 federalized Illinois National Guard members to Chicago over Governor Pritzker's objections. The stated goals support Operation Midway Blitz, a campaign to detain and deport undocumented immigrants. When Pritzker refused to call up the troops, the War Department issued an ultimatum and federalized them anyway. Texas National Guard members soon joined, escalating tensions as armed troops appeared on city streets. Illinois responded with a lawsuit, arguing the president cannot federalize a state's National Guard for domestic law enforcement without the governor's consent. A judge scheduled a hearing, but did not grant an immediate restraining order, leaving federal troops in place. This is part of a broader pattern of federal deployments to Democrat-led cities, often against local wishes. The legal battle now centers on where federal authority ends and state self-governance begins. As federal troops arrived in Chicago, the city's atmosphere shifted dramatically. The presence of military vehicles rolling through familiar neighborhoods sent shockwaves through the community, and the war of words between the state and the White House only intensified. Tensions were high, and uncertainty hung in the air as residents watched the unfolding events with a mix of fear and disbelief. President Trump, never one to shy away from controversy, called for the jailing of Governor Pritzker and Mayor Johnson, accusing them of endangering public safety and failing to protect their citizens. His statements, delivered with characteristic force, ignited fierce debate across the country and drew both condemnation and support from different corners of the political spectrum. Pritzker responded defiantly on social media, posting a simple but powerful message: "Come and get me." The governor's words quickly went viral, becoming a rallying cry for those who saw his stance as a bold defense of state authority and personal conviction. He framed Trump's threat as a fundamental attack on democracy itself, not just a policy dispute. Pritzker argued that the president's actions undermined the very principles of American governance, warning that such rhetoric could erode public trust in the nation's institutions. Mayor Johnson echoed this sentiment, linking Trump's call to a broader history of racial injustice and government overreach. He reminded the public that these moments are not isolated, but part of a long struggle for equality and justice in America. The White House doubled down, accusing Pritzker and Johnson of having blood on their hands. Officials insisted that federal intervention was necessary to restore order, further escalating the conflict and deepening the divide between state and federal authorities. The rhetoric has now moved far beyond politics, raising questions about the legitimacy of elected office and threatening the use of state power against political opponents. The nation watched as the boundaries of acceptable political discourse were tested in real time. Pritzker, a longtime Trump critic, now finds himself a national symbol of resistance. His defiance has inspired supporters across the country, while also drawing fierce criticism from opponents who see his actions as reckless. The animosity between the two sides is now laid bare for the nation to see, with every statement and countermove broadcast and analyzed in real time. The country is left to wonder how far this confrontation might go, and what it means for the future of American democracy. The stakes have never been higher for both state and federal leaders. As the crisis deepens, the choices made in these tense days will shape not only the fate of Chicago, but the direction of the nation itself. In response to the federal troop deployment, Mayor Johnson declared Chicago an ICE-free zone. The executive order restricts federal immigration authorities from using city resources, databases, or facilities for enforcement. This move is both symbolic and practical, creating logistical hurdles for Operation Midway Blitz. The White House condemned the order, calling it a betrayal of law enforcement. Immigrant rights advocates praised the move, while critics argued it obstructs federal law. The order deepens the legal and political standoff, making clear Chicago will resist the federal crackdown. Beyond politics, the conflict has deeply affected daily life in Chicago, especially for its large immigrant communities. The presence of federalized troops and aggressive raids has created fear and anxiety, turning neighborhoods into zones of uncertainty. Simple routines, going to work, taking kids to school, are now fraught with risk. Violent clashes and protests have erupted, straining the city's social fabric. Trust in law enforcement is eroding, and local businesses report fewer customers as residents stay home. Community organizations are overwhelmed by families seeking help. The psychological toll on children and families is immense. Sanctuary policies were meant to foster security. Now that sense of safety is shattered. The human cost of this showdown is measured in fear, hardship, and the erosion of community bonds. The Illinois lawsuit to block federalized troops is a critical test of American federalism. The state argues the president's power to federalize the National Guard is limited to extreme circumstances, which do not apply here. Legal experts say Trump's call to jail Pritzker and Johnson lacks constitutional basis. Federal law does not compel local officials to enforce immigration law. The Supreme Court's anti-commandeering doctrine supports this view. Mayor Johnson's ICE-free zone order exploits legal gray areas, denying cooperation without directly obstructing federal agents. The outcome could redefine the balance of power between states and the federal government. The courthouse is now as important a battleground as the city streets. The Pritzker-Trump conflict exposes the deep political divisions fracturing the United States. For Trump's supporters, the crackdown on Chicago is about restoring law and order and securing borders. For Democrats, it's an alarming abuse of power and a threat to democracy. Pritzker's defiance has made him a symbol of resistance, galvanizing his party and supporters. The standoff forces political leaders to take sides, deepening the partisan divide. Public trust in government erodes as leaders threaten each other and deploy troops. The showdown is testing the resilience of America's democratic fabric. The showdown over Chicago is a defining moment for the United States. Troop deployments, calls for jailing political opponents, and local resistance have brought the nation to a constitutional crossroads. The events force Americans to ask, how much power should a president have? Where's the line between federal authority and states' rights? The answers will shape the republic for decades. As legal and political battles continue, understanding the stakes is crucial. Democracy is fragile, requiring vigilance and respect for the rule of law. The story of Pritzker versus Trump is ultimately about the resilience of American democracy.